Having a well thought out business strategy is one of the biggest gaps in natural. My point is this. A lot of brands today are taught how to raise money, but they're not taught how to use that money. How to use that money to grow sales, how to get their product on more store shelves and into the hands of more consumers. That's what this episode's about. If you want to learn how to leverage your go to market strategy to compete more effectively with other brands, you're in the right place. Dustin, thank you for coming on today. Can you please start by telling us about yourself and your journey to K-pop?
Well, I started my career in investment banking actually in New York. I was with Goldman Sachs, and so I got a really strong financial background. And one thing that's super interesting, I think, that's helped differentiate me versus others in the marketplace is I take a very financially minded approach to marketing, to CPG, to branding. And that really has helped me grow in my career. But after that, with a few other stops, I went to Kellogg Business School in Chicago, where I had the opportunity to grow substantially with incredible people, learned an incredible amount of information. And from there, I went to General Mills, my first stint in CPG. And I had two experiences there that really have set the foundation for the rest of my career. The first is I actually started on a joint venture. So I wasn't in their mainline office. I was off in another building, and we did 8 Continent. And 8 Continent was a soy milk competitor to Silk. And at the time, I think it had a 10% market share to Silk's 80% market share. But we were number two in the market, to give you an idea of the marketplace at that time for soy milk. But we were innovating quickly. We were entrepreneurial. It wasn't the big CPG engine. And that's what I got experience, that kind of entrepreneurial thinking early. They sold off that business while I was there. I went from the smallest division to the biggest division with cereal. So Big G, it's called at General Mills, with all the cereals. And I was on the adult cereal brands. And I had the unique opportunity to work on Chex. And at the time, Chex, 80% of their volume was in the Chex holiday mix season. People loved making Chex Mix. The problem was they self-cannibalized because they launched a prepackaged Chex Mix in the snacks division. And on top of that, they really wanted to get people to eat Chex cereal again. So the challenge to me was, how do you deseasonalize Chex and get people to eat Chex cereal? And back in 2007, so keep in mind the time, we came up with this kooky idea called gluten-free. And back then, people didn't really know what that meant, but we launched a gluten-free Chex. We were the first to launch a national gluten-free CPG product with gluten-free Chex. And the reason it was impactful, not only because we came up with this great idea that differentiated ourselves and significantly changed the landscape, but it really impacted consumers' lives. So a story that I love telling, it's my favorite story, is a consumer wrote us a letter. And back then we got real letters. This wasn't like now, it's all emails, and it was a real letter. And it said the following: we bought a box of rice Chex for our daughter who has celiacs. And that night we heard her crying in her bedroom. And we walked upstairs and we found her under her sheets in a tent crying, eating a bowl of Chex cereal. And she was crying because it was the first time she could have real people food. Not the crazy stuff they had to go find at random stores. This wasn't now where it's easier to be vegan or easier to have a gluten-free lifestyle. So I really focused my career on doing that. I had a couple other stints, worked at White Wave on Horizon Organic and had a great experience there. I went to work for some private equities, went to Abbott Nutrition and helped grow their divisions with Zone Perfect and EAS. But ultimately decided to launch Ka-Pop because my belief in what healthy eating should be, and I never wanted to compromise. So everything about me and about this brand is about authenticity, simplicity, and joy. And I wanted to bring that back to the snack category. I wanted to bring that back to nutrition, to natural foods, get away from the serious no-no-nos. And it doesn't have to be a trade-off. Nutrition and health and joy don't need to be a trade-off. Eating healthy doesn't need to be a trade-off from having fun. Food is fun, and that's what we create. Our branding is fun, our food is fun, and the nutrition is real.
I appreciate your sharing that, and I couldn't agree with you more. So to kind of back up a little bit, couldn't agree with you more that food should be fun. I mean, we spend more time thinking about what apps to watch or whatever than we do thinking about the food we need. And in the salty snack category, it is so crowded, and there's so much noise, and people don't understand what's real food, and we'll get into that in a minute. But to go back a little bit, gluten-free treks. I remember when they came, actually back up even further, dating myself because I'm older than you. Eighth Continent. I remember them well, and actually I was doing projects for a White Wave at the time
Oh yeah.
that kind of helped them compete more effectively against you guys. So even though I was working for Spins, I was actually kind of farmed out to them. So I was working with. So point being is, I understand the landscape very well, and I've done a lot of work in that category with other brands. What an interesting category. So much opportunity there. Again, a lot of noise. So you got the checks, and you're dealing with cereal. Had some opportunities to do a lot of work with Kellogg's as far as other brands as well, natural brands. Interesting category that has really shot itself in the foot because consumers got smart and they realized that they only needed to wait till the product went on sale and then buy it. So
Yeah.
it pulled all the margins out of the category. So I'm sure you're part of that. So we might get into that in a little bit. But anyhow, then Abbott Labs, Zone Perfect, etc. All brands I'm familiar with, you've got a great background. And what I think is really interesting is, Kellogg School of Business MBA. That is really prestigious for anyone who doesn't
Thank you.
understand what that means. Yeah, that's a big, big, big deal. In fact, you get an MBA from them and you're guaranteed a nice paycheck someplace, which is great. So kudos to you and the
Thank you.
Wall Street background. So you've taken that and you've leveraged that to develop an old brand, your own brand.
Mhm.
So why in the heck did you decide to become an entrepreneur? What were you thinking? No, I'm serious. What
Yeah.
what caused you to go down this path? Because hey, this is not easy.
It's a great question, and I get asked that fairly frequently. And having been in this now, this journey, and we'll get into this more, I'm sure, but this has been the hardest journey of my entire life on a personal
Sure.
and professional front. And so I'm so happy I did it, but I definitely walked into it a little bit more blind than my experience would would relay. But here's what I would say is I have a very unique gift that I'm so fortunate where I'm able to take strategy and apply it. I think there's a lot of good people at strategy who are good at strategy. I think there's a lot of good people at execution. I think I'm able to take build strategies and then execute them quickly. Additionally, I have that great financial background. I've been so fortunate to be trained at some of the best campuses in the world, not only Kellogg School of Business, but Goldman Sachs and General Mills and White Wave and all these incredible organizations that I've worked for. And I've really taken all the good and learned some of the bad. But to get to your ultimate question, I like having the flexibility to grow and move fast. One of the downsides we all know with big CPG is they move slowly, very boxed thinking. There's very strategic ways that they have to grow. They have to launch brands that are going to get X percent ACV year one, X profitability. These type of things don't hamstrung small businesses. And so I got very good at going into people's brands, whether big companies. For a few years before I launched Ka-Pop, I was working for private equities as interim CEO or CMO of different companies. And I got very good into going to your brand or someone else's company and saying, here's how you fix it, here's how we grow it, and let's do that. And people would always say, why don't you go do your own thing? And I would always say, I'm very good at helping you. I don't have any good ideas. I'm not the idea guy for a company. I can help you fix your company. And I was also very pessimistic, although I like to call it realistic, about ideas. So when I would hear about an idea, I'd usually find the 10 reasons why it's flawed. And you brought this up, every category now, there's not a single category in the store that is not fragmented or volatile or competitive. So there was that factor. But to answer your story, one day I had a very serious injury where I tore my pec, AC joint, and bicep all at once. And I'm a very healthy eater. I work out 7 days a week, but I wasn't going to be able to work out for like 6+ months. And I kind of let my nutrition slip a little bit, which meant for me eating more popcorn, healthier, better for you chips that aren't really that good for you. And I realized the nutrition was lacking. It's all fillers. There's no good vitamins. And so I went into my pantry and I had ancient grains, and I'll go into ancient grains more, but these are incredible nutritious grains that have never been modified and so nutrient dense. And I said, I wonder if you can pop this. And similar to every other entrepreneur out there, I thought there could be a better way. And I popped it on my stove and I got these burnt little nuggets of popped sorghum and popped amaranth and popped quinoa. And it looked terrible, but it tasted delicious. It was filled with nutrients. it was like having your cake and eating it too. And then my kids loved it. My neighbors' kids loved it. People at Expo West loved it. And I knew I was onto something, and I decided to pursue this full time. And the journey that was in October of 2015. We launched in April of 2017. Just celebrated our 1 year anniversary of launch. So it's been a journey for sure. It's been an incredible journey.
Well, congratulations, a year. That's really cool. And to back up a little bit, yeah, it's a very different thing to help to run your own brand
Yep.
than to try to start someone else's brand. The big thing is that one, working for a big company, you don't have psychology, that the sort of insurance one. Just kidding. I mean, because it is a lot of brain damage at times, as you know, a lot of stress, etc. But the other thing is you get to go home at night and turn out the lights and relax and stuff. Whereas if it's your own brand, you own it. And so it is kind of 24/7. So I want to get into that a little bit more. When you decided to transition from helping other brands into working on your own brand by itself, what was the impetus behind that? What caused you to say, my kids like it. Let's see if I can make this work.
One of the frustrations that everyone has, I think, that work for somebody else at any stage in your life is you always have the what if I could do it this way, or what if I could tweak it in this fashion. And one of my frustrations with the natural food industry as a whole is there's a lot of Me Too products out there. I think there's a lot of banality in the branding and the execution. It's not to say there's not a lot of great brands out there. There are. But I think overall, we have the 87th kombucha or the 97th nut butter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to do something unique. And I was actually CEO of a company, interim CEO of a company at the time. And I had the opportunity to do that full time. And they were ready to actually relocate their company to Boulder for me, where I lived. I was commuting to their company every week in California. And I realized as I came up with this idea that number one, I needed to get proof of concept. And I don't mean in launching it and testing it. I meant really making sure that I'm not the only one who thought this was a good idea. And people get hung up by these large research and how much it's going to cost. I got mom groups in my neighborhood, bought them wine and said, come on over, let's try this product and let me know what you think, and did research that way. I took it to Expo West because I was in the industry. And this is an advantage I do have. I met with the buyer at Whole Foods as a friend and said, hey, I got this burnt Ziploc bag of crap here. What do you think? And explained the thought process behind it. I met with some private equity friends. So I was able and fortunate to get everything from the sophisticated professional opinions all the way down to the consumers, kids, adults, families, to help me understand, do I have a concept that can work? Do I have a platform that's expandable? And then can I make this into a real business? The funny thing is, though, I mentioned this was a popped sorghum product. It was a popped sorghum product from October 2015 to January of 2018. Keep in mind, I launched in April 2018. My product is, hopefully people are starting to know, is a popped chip.
Yeah.
I had to pivot pretty last minute, and we can go into that. So sometimes the product you're working towards or the idea, you have to not only know when to run through the walls, take the feedback, ignore some, go with others, but when it's time to pivot and really take your business to the next level. And I can guarantee you all the success that we've had would not have been possible had we not made that pivot.
Gotcha. No, I appreciate you sharing that. In fact, I do want to get into them more. That's interesting. One of the things I didn't frame is that I've had the benefit of that mainstream CPG experience. And you were talking about all the Me Too brands. So one of the challenges that I face, Dustin, is that a lot of the brands think, oh, I know what category management is. They don't have that experience. What I find is that we were trained in a certain way where we learned how to do things a very specific way. They worked on the foundation and they helped us build that foundation so that we understand how products are grown or how to gain distribution or how to compete more effectively at retail. So leveraging that gave you, I think, a lot of great insights. Mm-hmm. So as you're using that or leveraging that experience and building it into this, again, deciding to do it on your own, what did you find that was lacking, or did you find anything that was lacking in terms of the experiences that you had previously to help you get to this point? And then, of course, I want to get into the pivot.
Yeah, as I mentioned at the beginning, this has been the hardest, most humbling job I've ever had. And that's with someone coming in with 15 years of experience,
Right.
right? Having been a CEO, I've been a CMO, I've been a CCO, I've been a brand manager and a salesman. I've done all the roles, and I've learned more in the past 2 years than those 15 years combined. And I'll get into what those things were lacking. I think there's a couple factors. One with big CPG, and to pivot a bit or digress a bit, it's actually interesting because a lot of big CPG people want to go work for startups or want to go to a small company. And they see the sex appeal and they see how fun it can be. But it has a very high failure rate of big CPG people going straight to small companies because it is a huge learning curve. And the best way I can relate that is I was running companies that were $2 million in sales. The gap between a $2 million company and one that's $0 is infinitely wide. So one that's making $100 million to zero, don't get me started. So one of the things that big CPG, I'll first talk about the pros. I mean, one thing that really helps you is understand what the different pieces to the business are, how to think about a P&L, how important trade is, how to work with the sales organization, how to effectively build a product, how to think about branding, all the kind of standard principles that are critical for building a company. What it doesn't train you for, though, is to rely completely on yourself. And in a world where this industry, unfortunately, is not set up very well to support small businesses, which is incredibly ironic because how much this industry has grown recently is all driven by small natural food companies. The entirety of the growth in the food industry, if not 90% of it, has been driven by small natural foods companies. And yet the industry, while there's plenty of agencies and people out there to support these companies, the overall infrastructure is not built to help support small companies. And that's why you lose so much money. And that's why, unfortunately, you almost have to sell to a strategic in the long run to be successful because the infrastructure is not there. And that's been the biggest learning that I've struggled with in this company is constantly fighting what I call mediocrity. It's constantly fighting gaps in the marketplace. It's constantly fighting for my fair share of attention. And that's with everything going great for our company. And so, there's days where I'm literally brought to tears on how hard we're fighting and clawing our way from, LTL shipments that can't get dropped off and you're trying to get an order launched or, people treating you 10th in line because you're small and insignificant, right? Mm-hmm. And it's hard and it's humbling and it's scary. But that's why I think as much as product, taste, quality is important, perseverance, dedication, and passion is more important. Being convicted, and that's why you can't be mediocre. That's why you can't be okay with that. You have to fight and fight and fight to be successful.
I appreciate your sharing all of that. I want to go one step further. The other thing about big CPGs, they're very siloed and they move people around. And the goal within a big CPG company, as far as the incentive structure, is that you get in a position, you're there for about 18 months, you need to gain X amount of profit, then you move to another position, etc. You don't have that continuity. And to your point, it's not your problem once you're almost ready to move into a different position, maybe the same company, etc. And also, you're right, they don't. A CPG turns out people fast, which is good and bad. But coming into small business, you're absolutely right. And one of the frustrations that I have, the sole reason that I hung my shingle and started down this path is to fill that gap. So I feel your pain. And I listen to other brands share the exact same thing with me. They're taught that if they take a canned top line report into a retailer, that's enough. Mm-hmm. I would proudly say that that's a waste of paper and ink if you don't know what it means or how to understand it. And you certainly don't want to be telling your competitor, look, I'm just like everyone else on the shelf. Or like you said, the Me Too brands. So I really appreciate your sharing that. This is exactly why I wanted to have you on the podcast. This podcast is different because instead of talking about, wow, I've got a great product and my mom likes it, etc., let's talk about the fact that this industry does, like you said, and I appreciate you saying this and I agree 100%, does a lousy job of helping and supporting the brands that are out there. The reality is that your checkbook is far more valuable to you as far as a resource than anything else on your plate. You've got that big CPG experience and experience from other companies. So you have a leg up in the sense that you understand or know things that they don't know. And so let's talk about a little bit of that. When you're talking about gaps, with fighting mediocrity, the gaps, etc. Love the way you put that. Couldn't agree with you more. Can you give me some illustrations or stories around that, and how you were able to cross over that threshold, or how you were able to defeat that?
Yeah. So for those listening, I have a big grin on my face because I'm trying to think about how to do this as a small company without giving too specific of examples for those out there to make it even harder on us. But
Right.
I will give you some illustrations. Before I do that, though, one thing I want to say is regardless of the mediocrity or regardless of the challenges out there, it is incumbent on each one of us, whether you're at a big CPG, at a small company, to always put your best foot forward and
Yes.
drive hard. And it's obvious, and people get that, I know, but there's a difference between saying I gave it my best or doing everything you can to drive through that wall. So examples I'll give really around, I think, there's big distributors in our world, right? And they, to be fair to them, they have hundreds, thousands of brands they're working on. And they have hundreds of new brands that come in the door probably every day that are like us that want to drive it. And I don't think they have the man or woman power to support all the initiatives that we want to do because, hey, guess what the most important brand in the world is to me right now? It's Ka-Pop.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the only thing I think about. And you said earlier about the 24/7. One of the side effects of this job is an incredible amount of insomnia.
Yes.
And so I think about it all the time. And so trying to get, Unify or KHE's attention and making sure that they are giving you the support you need. And they've created great programs like Next, for instance, with Unify. And we've been able and fortunate to go to some of the DCs and present our brands and get in front of them and do a show to explain them why we're important. But you have to fight for that. They're not going to just say, hey, we got your back. You have to fight for their attention. You have to build those relationships. Every chance I have to create a relationship with somebody at a distributor, at a retailer, my team will tell you we do everything in our power, we don't have a lot of fun stuff, but t-shirts and swag and, we try and participate in their programs. We do everything in our power to make their lives easier.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're just not set up. Retailers are not set up to handle 50,000 independent brands. They have 50,000 products in the grocery store, right? A big grocery store. They don't have the luxury and manpower to manage all these different natural food companies. And so you really just have to fight and claw away from that gap in the marketplace. And some of the other areas I will talk about, like demo agencies as a whole, I think get a bad rap because there's this fluidity to the marketplace, some of the trade and merchandising agencies, and there's great ones out there, and Amazon agencies and e-commerce agencies. There's agencies out there that check the box and do what they say they're going to do, but they don't care as much
Right.
about the brand as you do. And so I constantly am fighting to find agencies and partners, and I've done a phenomenal job of finding those agencies through lots of trial and error who care about my brand, who work with us, who have built this company. And those people are the ones that help you grow, but it's going to take a lot of trial and error. We've gone through, 3 Amazon agencies. Now we have an amazing one that we work with, but it took a lot of pain to get there.
Well, and I'm
That's
glad you.
that question, by the way, without trying to give too many specifics.
No, no, I appreciate it. I think that's great. That's perfect. You brought up a couple key points, and so let's talk about this a little bit more. When I worked for Kimberly Clark, we had a direct model. We had sales reps. We had people that were all on the same page, same incentive structure, etc. And then one day they decided to cater more toward Wall Street as opposed to Main Street, and over 3/4 of us were gone in a heartbeat. And that was not only extremely disheartening, but the fact that the brand, it kind of ripped the soul out of the brand, and they're not number one in every category anymore like they were back then. The point is the business model and the way that big brands cater more toward the bottom line, toward Wall Street, etc. When you're working for yourself, like you said, it's got to be your brand. I would argue that one of the biggest challenges that all small brands are dealing with, like you said, is you don't know what you don't know. And so
Yep.
finding the good resources, one, and then two, like you said, there's a lot of people that phone it in. There are a lot of companies that don't have that relationship. And I would go one step further. Instead of the distributor, I would focus on the retailer, the end retailer. And so I would recommend, I know I told you that I'd give you an opportunity, ask me a couple of questions at the end as far as bottlenecks you're trying to solve. I would change the conversation from being a push strategy, which is what every brand uses today, to what I would call a pull strategy. And a pull strategy, Dustin, is when you become an invaluable resource to that retailer. And there's a lot to it. We'll get into that more in a minute. But when you can become an invaluable resource to the retailer, then they will tell the distributor, look, you will get these guys in your warehouse, you will make them available for me, etc. So it's a much different model. And like, again, things being broken in the industry. When I started in this industry, we had distributors for all the big brands. Everyone did. And those distributors are gone. And the reason they're gone is because they didn't provide any value long term. I have some concerns about what distributors and brokers, et cetera, do and don't do. Long story short, this is your company. And I believe that you need to remain the captain of your ship. So what I try to teach, or what this podcast is about, is helping you keep your hand firmly on the wheel, to teach you the strategies, etc., to help you level the playing field with the big companies, and more importantly, develop that relationship with the retailer. So the retailer says, I want Ka-Pop versus anyone else on the shelf.
Yeah.
And at that point, that changes the conversation. At that point, then you can negotiate slotting and all that other stuff. So what are your thoughts about that? Does that seem radically weird to you, or?
No, I 100% agree, down to the micro level. I mean, one thing I talk to small brands about, one of the luxuries when you are very small, and I'm talking your first few months, and you're in 10 stores or 15 stores,
Right.
is you should have a one-on-one direct relationship with every manager in that store.
Yes.
I'm not talking just about the store manager. I'm talking about I'm in snacks. We knew the dairy manager. We knew the beverage manager. We knew the cashiers. We would buy them all chips. We would do everything we could to develop those relationships, because those people will become advocates. Now, as you get bigger, maybe it goes from all the cashiers to just the store manager. But fine, build that store manager relationship. As you get bigger from there, and we're kind of still in that precipice area, but building the relationship with the buyers is absolutely critical. So one thing I do want to hit on that you said, one thing I say when I go to every meeting, and this doesn't matter if I'm actually going to a 2-store chain or a 100-store chain, is I say we're small and we act entrepreneurial, but we will operate with all the big company strategy, thinking, and execution that you're used to. And it's one thing I end every meeting with, because I think they value entrepreneurial thinking. They love the brands. They know we're the ones driving the industry, but they don't have the time or the ability to manage all the inadequacies of most small companies. And that usually comes to inability to fulfill orders,
Right.
making promises you don't keep. And so there's a lot of onus on us as an industry as well as the vendors. But I say that on every meeting. And what I mean by that is this: we will stay true to every commitment we make, and we will do everything in our power to make this as easy as possible on you. And when we do mess up, because guess what? We will mess up. I will be up 24/7 fixing that error for you and making it up tenfold for you. And that's hard, because unfortunately there is a lot outside our control. So I mentioned some of these things, like transportation as an LTL versus full truckloads. That's something I never really dealt with in fact, I never dealt with that in my career before.
Mm-hmm.
And learning how difficult LTL shipments are. One little random piece of the business that no one thinks about, but the complexity of LTL shipments, the cost, the timelines. We had to work to find good brokers that we work with on the transportation side. But long story short, I 100% agree with you. And I think building those relationships, as big as you get. One other point I'll make, Dan, too, on the consumer level. I've personally done, and with Haley, who's part of my team, hundreds and hundreds of demos.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot stress enough how important doing your own demos are. especially early, but I still do them and I will always do them for the rest of my life with this brand
Mhm.
for a few reasons. One, I know every possible comment a consumer will say about my company. I've heard them all now. And I know which ones are consistent. I know which ones are kind of the one-offs. I know which age demographic buys which product. I know which psychographic buys which product. I know every step along that journey. The second thing is I know where to take this company. I know where to think about going forward. I know where to think about how we grow. And so that's incredible. And I've told all my big CPG friends that I wish I had done this earlier in my career. And it's the advice I now give to big CPG guys is go demo.
Mhm.
There's no better learning doing that. And by the way, what's the side benefit? You meet the cashiers, you meet the store managers, you meet all the people involved. It's a phenomenal thing. And the final thing I'll say about it for us, thankfully, we have a great product. So 4 out of 5 people who try it buy it. And on those days when I need an emotional boost, talking to consumers, their excitement about our product is emotionally uplifting. It's fantastic. So
Can't beat that. Real
it's fantastic.
feedback. So podcast 68, that was all about that. If you had a chance to listen to it yet, if you haven't listened to it, the whole idea was that as a small DSD driver working for a regional chip company, I was able to leverage those relationships so that when a big retailer launched their first superstore in the market, I managed to get a 4,200 chip display in their lobby, sold 5,900 bags of chips that week. And my number one competitor, the biggest name in the salty snacks category, got
Yeah.
this many, zero displays anywhere in the store. And the point was, like we're saying, if you can deliver that exceptional value, if you can stand behind your product, I mean, bottom line is your name is on that product, you literally. So,
Literally.
I mean, anything, if you've got an out of stock, that's your fault. It's not the broker's fault. It's not anyone else's fault. It's your fault. From the perspective of the consumer, that's tough love. But the reality is, if you take that much responsibility for your brand, at the end of the day, that's what's going to move the needle. And that's when you start becoming what I would call a category leader. I would define a category leader is any brand willing and able to step up and help the retailer grow sustainable sales and increase shopper traffic by leveraging the strength of your brand. Big difference from category captain, what we're used to in the big CPG. That's out of the realm of any small brand, too expensive, etc. But if you can provide those valuable resources and insights that your competition doesn't provide, and because you don't phone it in, and because you make sure you take care of all the problems, and you go the extra distance, that sets you apart. And one more thing, brilliant, talking to the consumers. So many brands think that once the product gets backed up and gets loaded into the truck at the back of the warehouse, they're done. They can go home, drink a beer, Miller time, whatever. But the point is, that's when the selling starts. And
Yeah.
what you're finding, and this is key, and I really want to highlight this, is that the insights that you gain about the consumer that uses your product, how they evangelize it, etc., after they take it home. That's far more valuable than any sort of study or consumer study or whatever, because that gives you an understanding of your customer, and it lets you talk to them in their language. And when you can have that one-on-one intimate relationship with your customer, that differentiates you in the category. And by the way, I hope you're leveraging that at retail. I hope you're able to go to the retailers in your presentation and say, here's what consumers say, testimonials. More importantly, here are the anecdotes. Here are the stories that they share. For example, the girl, underneath the tent blanket. That's a
Yep.
great story. Now, granted, that was mainstream CPG. Just kidding. No, but having those stories or a wealth of those stories, again, that's so critically important. Here's another thought. If I go into the store and I buy your product, you know nothing about me. You don't know what age group or how I use the product or whether I like it or dislike it. But if you're making a concentrated effort to get to know me and to find out how I use the product, etc., again, it helps you innovate. It helps you pivot. It helps you do all the things you need to do. So more importantly than any of the finance and all this, and this is critically important, this creates the roadmap, the blueprint, etc., so that when you go to a new retailer, now you have a really great story. And that's why I launched my Turnkey Sales Story Strategies course. It's free. But the reason, the impetus behind that, Podcast 68, But the point being is to teach brands what you're sharing with us today. So thank you. It's, who is your customer? A lot of people think they know it. Even the big brands. The reason I was so effective at kicking our big competitors' butt, big brands like P&G, etc., Frito, is because I knew my customer far better than they did at that specific retailer. And I was able to help that retailer understand not only who my customer was, how they shop, when they bought Huggies, etc., what else did they buy with it? And again, if you can leverage that, that helps you stand out on the shelf. So kudos to you. I mean, I think that's great that you do that. Anything else you want to add?
I would just say that one of the things people say about demos in particular is it's not cost effective or the return on investment isn't there. And I'm a big numbers guy. I'm a big ROI guy. And absolutely, if you look at demos, it's on a individual demo basis, it's not. But I would say, people also ask me, is that a good use of your time? As a CEO or someone trying to grow this business, I literally cannot think of a better use of my time being with consumers. And I gave all the reasons why, so I'm not going to rehash those, but a few others that I would talk about, some are minor, some are bigger. Consumers, when they get a chance to interact literally with the people on the team, part of the company, they're so used to just demo people handing them stuff. And I'll be like, no, this is my company. Their eyes light up and they get much more passionate about what I'm doing. Those people become evangelists. And we all know word of mouth is the best marketing strategy out there, right? Driving. And I have people who are so passionate about our brand already. I mean, my favorite story about our brand is we have someone who got a tattoo of our brand already. So I can say us and Harley Davidson. And I always say that Harley Davidson, I guarantee you didn't get someone getting a tattoo within the first month of their existence. So, hey, we're and it wasn't a complete stranger. Cool. A true story. But so demos really allow you to build that relationship. But now learning about the consumer, I know so much about our consumer and it helps me dictate how to grow our business, new flavors, what size packaging we need to do. We know what type of modifications we need to make. And by the way, I've created those relationships with the store personnel, like we mentioned. So when we walk back in, like one of my favorite guys around here, this guy Cisco, a store manager at Lucky's, he'll tell us what's going on with the brand. We're seeing these people buy them. We're seeing this happen. We're saying, hey, what if you do this? Oh, can we get a spin rack here? I haven't done the 5,200 bags yet, so I'm going to work with you later to get that figured out. But the reality is we have at Alfalfa's with Mark and other people, smaller stores local to Boulder, we've set up these huge displays because of the relationships that I've created, that Haley and my team have created, that evangelists for our brand have created on our behalf. So it's fantastic.
It is great. And on that note, podcast episode 123 just had that. We talked about the importance of in-store demoing. And so to reemphasize this, at what point ever do you have the undivided attention of a future customer in front of you where you have the ability to either lose them forever or convert them into a lifelong, like you said, a brand evangelist? And that is the best marketing you can have. I have this belief, and you're going to laugh. You might, I don't know. I believe that a CEO should not be a perpetual fundraiser. And that, I think, is one of the biggest failures of this industry. When you look at all the different programs out there, it's your brand, you need to go raise money. Oh, but then you need to go raise money. And then you need to go raise money. If you can do what you're doing, and if you can have a great story to be able to tell the retailers, then not only can you raise better money, you can get better terms, et cetera, et cetera. So there's some benefits there. But going back to what we're talking about, as far as the use of your time, at the end of the day, if no one buys your stuff, you don't have a brand. Yep. And we go back to where we started earlier. You're putting, as you said, crap in a bag. Here you go, try this. I tell young brands, just because your mother likes it doesn't mean that everyone else will. And I know that's tough love and that's really hard to hear. But the reality is that you've got to understand what your consumer wants, why they want it, et cetera. And by the way, this is so much more valuable than social media or throwing stuff out there. One of the things I think you probably agree with me on is that one of the things that makes natural is while the big brands are talking at us, look at us, we're number one, we're great, aren't we big, aren't we wonderful, to look, we've got a relationship with our customer. We understand what they want. So we're innovating at a rate or a scale or however you want to put it. So we're giving consumers what they want. Now, the
Yep.
salty snack category. One of the things that I love about that category is that you can wake up every morning and decide how much money you want to make because it's basically all an impulse purchase.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about that.
So the salty snack category is, incredibly fragmented. It's one of the lower barriers to entry categories, which is difficult for new brands like mine coming into the business. And I'll jump into how we offset that as well. But like I said, I mean, every time you hear a story, you'll hear the next phrase say, it's a really complicated category. Every category, there's not a single category in the store that isn't competitive or fragmented or volatile. Not anymore. I mean, maybe there is. I can't think of it. Maybe produce. I don't know. But there's the growth in packaged foods and entrance into this market is phenomenal. Look at Expo West alone. 85,000 people attended this year. It may have been more, but I think it was 85,000 people, over
Felt like it.
4,000 booths,
Yeah.
right? It's insane how much this industry is going. When I first went in 2008 or whatever year I went, it was the convention center. It was manageable. It was only the natural foods industry. Now you have private equities. You have the big CPGs are there. They even have booths now, the big CPGs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very different world that we live in with natural foods. So to answer your question, I think it comes down to how do you differentiate yourself? I also have the pleasure of teaching marketing at University of Colorado.
Mm.
And, I teach what we do on a daily basis. And I'm a very, very big believer in a few key things. Number one, and any student in my class will tell you this because I bring it up every single class. What's the most important thing in marketing, in business? And the correct answer is the target.
Mm-hmm.
The target is the most important thing. And a lot of times that's forgotten. So you bring up like, oh, my mom likes it. Well, that's great. Is your mom the target? Who's the target in everything must speak to them. Then I say, what's the most important framework in marketing? And I personally believe, and we'll go down on a sword on this, the 4 Ps, product, place, promotion, and pricing, are the most important attributes to run a business. Everything you do falls into that. Doesn't mean they're easy, but everything I do on a daily basis is focused on the 4 Ps. What do I need to focus on? How do I build that? How do I leverage it to be more successful? And each one of those, I teach a whole semester basically on the 4 Ps. And so you must differentiate, you must do it in relation to your target, and you must create some type of barrier to entry. Well, in our world, there's not patents for the most of our food companies. Mm-hmm. There's trade secrets, they like to call them. But really, it's about branding execution. Mm-hmm. How do you build a relationship with consumers that differentiates against the next Me Too follower? I'm the only one who's doing what I'm doing. But I'm not naive to think that somebody else is going to come and try and do this, especially as we continue to grow. Mm-hmm. I need to create that relationship with the consumer that they will choose Ka-Pop 10 times out of 10, not competitor B or competitor C or D or E or F. And so that's what I really focus on, is building that relationship. We talk about it through demos, through social media, but I constantly communicating with our consumers to build that relationship.
Good for you. So one thing that one of the things that you didn't say that I think a lot of people don't understand about this industry is that because we're natural, our ingredients are pretty much, the recipes pretty much on the back of the bag.
Yep.
Whereas in the big CPG companies, some secret sauce formula, whatever, and who knows what it is, and you probably don't want to know what it is. So that makes it even more challenging. I want to add another couple weeks to your semester. Don't forget, when you're talking about the 4 Ps, the 5th P, the most important P, people. Nothing happens without the people. Because going back to what you said earlier, if your mom's the target, how much can she buy in a given year? Think about it. Her garage is only so big no matter how much she loves you. So you've got to have the people, and each one of those aspects is so critically important. And one of my things that I did that I had so much success with was dealing with each one of those areas, those 4 Ps, 5 Ps, is with the category management, developing a trade marketing strategy that was accurate. That's a whole nother conversation. But most trade marketing strategies trade marketing is a challenge in and of itself. But I was able to, when I was working for Kimberly-Clark, get down to the contribution of a brand back to the for a given promotion, et cetera, which That's a big deal if you understand what this is, or the pricing, and again, the advanced category management. So I appreciate you bringing this up. I know we're coming up close to the end of the hour. Well, actually, we have 44 minutes. I told you that you could share with me a bottleneck. You said you've got a couple of them.
Yeah.
So before we go there,
Yeah.
what else do you want to say? And then also, I want to make sure that you tell us about where to learn more about you, where to learn more about K-pop, what is K-pop, what are ancient grains, etc.
All right.
Lot to unpack.
I'll give the sales spiel real quickly. For anyone who's interested in our brand, www.kapopsnacks.com. So kapopsnacks.com. For anyone listening, I'll throw this out there. If you use the code, which is my fun title for myself, the Top Ka-Pop, Topkapop, get 15% off our website. But one thing, ancient grains are grains that have never been hybridized, modified, or selectively bred for thousands of years. So they retain their inherent nutrition. They're incredibly regenerative for our soils, for our earth. They use less water. They're good for our earth. They're good for our body. My favorite way of explaining it is I have a graph that shows ancient corn, which is tiny, to what we've done to modern corn, even non-GMO corn. It's big. It's been bred to be higher sugar. We like sweet. I also talk about carrots in the U.S. We typically know them as orange carrots. So around the world, they're purple, green. So people love, the sweeter varieties. So we try and bring back the authenticity, simplicity, and joy back to snacking with Ka-Pop snacks. The only other thing, I just want to touch back on one thing. We jumped into demoing a bit. And so I'm going to give, if I can, my 2-minute spiel on demoing or less. We go to demos and we sell. This past weekend, we did some demos. We sold 122 bags at one, 90 bags at another. When we launched Central Market in 3 days, and this was just Haley and I going to 10 Central Market stores in 3 days, sold 2,000 bags.
That's good.
Every launch is like that because one of the things that you need to do when demoing is get everyone to come try your brand. We make sure that anyone, we call it the 16-foot rule, but anyone within 16 feet of our table is going to hear about our brand. We may not get them all to try it, but we definitely have a very high success rate. The second thing I'd recommend is people, when they're shopping nowadays, they're busy, they're in their own world. So we try and disrupt their mindset by being really cheesy and goofy and fun. Because again, and we're a fun brand, so we try and do that, but we have fun with it to disrupt that kind of mindset. The final thing I'll say in demoing that we do differently than what we see around is we make the sale. Too often you do this nice pitch, you tell them that it's vegan and gluten-free and non-dairy and blah, 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 and you're like, so thanks for trying. We will always then say, so how many bags can we send you home with this weekend? Or
love that.
I'd like to take this home for the weekend and share with your family. Like we always make opportunity. And that's why we have the numbers we do. That's why 4 out of 5 people who try it buy it, because not only is it a great product, but we ask for the sale. So don't be afraid to ask for the sale. As long as you're polite, positive, we've never had anyone not once be upset with us for asking for the sale.
You need to listen to episode 123. This is exactly what we talk about, and then go one step further. So even if you, the CEO, can't be there, what do you need to know to have an effective demo? To your point, I used to run the demo people when I was the grocery manager at Price Club, which is now Costco. And yeah, you just can't stand there and hand it out or put a stacker on the table and expect people to fall in love with it.
Yep.
But the sales increases that you can get, 400%, 1,000%, I mean, unbelievable numbers. You cannot show me a lift that you can create using any other traditional promotional methods that comes anywhere near that. Not even putting a NASCAR out or any of the, the free, the big giveaways, etc. BOGOs don't even do that. In fact, actually, BOGOs cost a lot of money. But, a whole nother conversation. But absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. Anything else you think?
By the way, what's also great about the data is it doesn't show up as like a TPR or a feature in the data. So you're getting that lift without it hitting your merch lift. So when you're using that data to sell at the retailers, you're able to show these amazing lists, especially as a small brand, and it doesn't look like it's all being driven by merch.
Right.
So it is merch, but it's not typical merch. So
well, I'd love to keep, because I've got another thing. You just made me think of something else that I'd love to bring in there. So you pay attention to base sales. Yeah. Base sales are your sales, your actual sales. Base sales are your sales in the absence of any promotion. And the bottom line is, if you can deliver value, contribution, et cetera, to the brand, et cetera, got a course about that, That's a whole nother conversation. At the end of the day, that's what's going to keep you going. Some brands succeed because they raise a lot of money, they promote the heck out of the brand, they become a one-hit wonder, and they're gone. Kind of
Yep.
where we started this conversation. Too many brands don't have the resources or the tools or the ability to really know what they don't know so that they can drive their sales or build their brand, etc. around them. So thank you
Yep.
so much for sharing that.
Cool.
Okay, I'm ready.
The bottleneck. I've thought a lot about this since you told me that I could ask you about bottlenecks. And there's one that we come back to, and I've struggled with the right way to ask this, so I'll just ask it. But
Okay.
our biggest challenge is time. Our biggest resource constraint is time.
Right.
And what I've found is someone who's very proactive. I, as a growing business, we become reactive. So my question to you is, how do you think about in a world where there's two people running a company and every day you're struggling to keep your head above water just to maintain the daily business? What do you think are the most important things to prioritize and focus on for the future growth of the company while on a daily basis you're trying to maintain business operations?
That's actually a really good question. And it's a tough question. It's a question that I face too. How do you prioritize your time? So, on one hand, there are things that you need to do that don't
Mhm.
pay the bills. And on
Yep.
the other hand, there are customers that you need to take care of. And so the honest answer is automation. Now you can't automate everything, etc. But if you can develop good systems, good practices, etc., and put those in place, and then I would hire someone as a temp to take some of those things off your plate. So let me, as an example, if you're using data, well, you get the canned top line report from whomever, and what does it mean, how to use it, etc. You can hire someone to do that.
Mhm.
Now, that's not going to help you compete effectively. So, what's a better way to use that data? Get someone that understands it, that can manipulate the data, that can pull out the insights that are going to differentiate you from other brands. Take the time to learn that, take the time to understand that. The consumer piece, you're already doing that. So, take those insights and find a way to bake them into your presentation. Those are the things that you need to be hands on. But once you get to a point where you've got systems in place, then you start developing recreating the same report. Once a quarter, I would consider, I would almost insist, if it was my brand, I would insist that you have someone do a really deep dive into the category to understand what's going on in the trends beyond what you're saying on a weekly basis, monthly basis, etc. So I think I think this the honest answer is you need to think about what are the things that don't require you to take a lot of time. What are the things that you're not good at, that you struggle with, that you would rather not be doing? And if you can farm those out, because those are the things that, like it or not, you're going to find excuses, reasons, etc., to make those projects last a lot longer than they should.
Yep.
So get those off your plate. And then again, it's all about surrounding a good team. So you're in natural. You've got a lot of great resources. Again, this podcast, all the stuff we've been talking about and whatnot, those will help answer some of those questions. Use what Anthony Robbins calls net time. You're driving into someplace, etc. Listen to a podcast. Fill your mind full of good information. Willard Bennett, great speaker, several years ago had you probably don't know who he is. Miller Bennett, I'm sorry, had this great analogy that the pain has really stuck with me. So you think about your mind, it's a tank, and unless you're constantly pouring water, quality stuff into it, it eventually drains out. It's got tank with a slow leak. So continually filling your mind with quality information, resources, insights, etc. Attend the trade shows, attend the networking events, and then said you're very physically active. Make sure you make time for yourself. But as far as the business is concerned, you need to figure out what are the things that are must do versus things that should do. You need to get your infrastructure in place, leverage other people to help you do that. And since you now have evangelistic consumers, start asking them what they would recommend or what they suggest when you're thinking about new product innovation, new packaging, stuff like that. That'll take some of it off your plate. So I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Kind of top level, but at the same time, if you get into the weeds, I mean, there are days where I get lost on a project and I'll look up and go, oh crud, it's 9 o'clock at night and What did I accomplish today? So I guess, okay, so that's the other key point. Instead of thinking about what did you do today, think about what did you accomplish today. So no, the difference is instead of checking something off my to-do list, you want to make sure that you crossed off something, an accomplishment that helped move you closer to goals. And then, of course, none of this is possible unless you plan effectively. I was having a great conversation with someone about a business plan. This should be right up your alley. So any brand, I don't care whether you're who you are or what you're doing, you need to have a business plan. And your business plan shouldn't include how do I raise capital to keep going next week and then raise more capital. It should be what I want to be in a year, 2 years, 3 years, etc. Do I want to exit? Do I want this to become a legacy brand? So as you go backwards, now you can start overlaying your promotional strategies and stuff like that. And
Yep.
now this can change. It can be flexible. But the reality is when I started in this industry, we planned for promotions a week, a month, or two in advance. Now I would recommend that any brand out there try to plan for a couple years in advance. That's a big ask. But if you can understand what are your needs in terms of forecasting, planning, etc., then that will give you a roadmap. And so one of the things I've got, I should actually include this in the course. It's in some of the mini courses. I'm sorry, include this in the podcast as a scorecard. And a scorecard is a really cool tool that you can use to manage any project. So for example, I want to make sure I've got a promotion coming up at a store. How much product do I need to have in that store over and above what I normally sell to support it? When does the product need to show up? When is all of those things that need to happen? So then you can take that scorecard and hand it to someone else and let them execute it. Does that help?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Great.
I love the what did I accomplish today versus what did I do
Yeah.
today? Because I think we and myself definitely get lost in checking off the to-do list, focusing on the items I need to get done versus where are we moving this brand forward. I mean, that's the thing that I tell people with all the, the years of experience I have. It doesn't matter when you're in the weeds on the day-to-day basis trying to
Right.
just move the business. And so I'm the same as everybody else. And, I have the luxury and pleasure of being part of the Kraft Heinz Incubator Springboard program. I'm with four other amazing startup brands,
Good.
and we're all at different stages of brands. And it's so fascinating to be a part of this and watching how everyone handles these different movements and leveraging each other's strength to move the ship forward. So, no, I love that thinking. I'm going to write it on our wall here and make it our
Good.
mantra.
Good.
Although there's days I'm starting to be like, what did we do? But
Yeah.
how are we moving the ship forward? I love that. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and I'm glad that it helped. A lot of people spend most of their time managing their to-do list. And
Yep.
another thing is the really successful CEOs, the really successful leaders, let's say leaders, are the leaders that know when to say no. And that's a tough one because I'm a people pleaser and I'm one of those people that, I got to get involved. And I had this obnoxious belief years ago as a store manager, etc. I used to be, like I said, grocery manager at Price Club. I would get there every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning and I would leave there at 9 or 10 at night. But it was okay because I only worked 6 days a week. But, I had this idea that if I wasn't there, the place would fall apart. That's ridiculous. And your health suffers, etc. You've got to be able to say no. You've got to be able, and then the next big part of that is you need to train people to fill your shoes. I believe that your role as a leader is to champion your subordinates and get your subordinates to be able to do your job effectively, to kind of work you out of a job. And I believe the role of a subordinate is to make you look like a superstar. And if you have that sort of a philosophy culture within your business, then they will eventually want to take that off your shoulders. So anyhow, thank you. So you said you had another bottleneck for me.
Well, I want to add
Go
one thing
ahead.
to what
Yeah.
you said, sorry, on the no. One of the things I used to preach when I would go into companies and help founders or help executives or do it myself, and it was a lot easier when I was going to somebody else's business,
Yeah.
but I'd always coach this. You need to say no as an entrepreneur to good ideas.
Yes.
You need to know when to say no to money-making ideas. And that's the hardest thing when you're an entrepreneur and you're struggling and you see opportunity for ACV or distribution, you see opportunity for a paycheck to come, or not paycheck, but a check to the business to come in. And you're like, oh, I got to do that. The shiny object syndrome is rampant in entrepreneurship. And that's one of the hardest things. And I used to have a really easy time helping others. It's phenomenally more difficult when you're sitting in the seat. God bless, it's so much harder. But I want to add that to the say no thing.
Oh, thank you. Well, and on that note, I mean, I'm sorry, I run into a lot of brands that do that. They get a call from a retailer clear across the country. I want your product on my shelf. Bad idea. You
Yeah.
can't support it. You don't have the infrastructure, et cetera. So absolutely. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
So the last bottleneck I'll throw at you, it's not so much a bottleneck, but maybe advice or opinion, is so we got great growth, and I always talk about companies' different life cycles as a small business, and I think one of the first, in my opinion, is the $2 million mark. I think that's that first kind of big chunk. So we have, I'll call it proof of concept. We're in a good chunk of stores. We're seeing good momentum, our velocity. What do you think is the most important thing? So we talked about prioritizing just now, but I want you to help me. I want you to pick one thing, if you can, that you think is the most important thing to do to make go from here to that $2 million mark.
People, number 5 on the list, on the marketing list. So let me explain. If you can build an evangelistic community around your brand, remember, I buy your stuff, you don't know who I am, okay? It doesn't help you grow. If you can build an evangelistic community around your brand, better yet, if you can build that community outside of a traditional retail store through an email list, etc., develop a relationship. One of the biggest wastes of money, trade marketing, is to have a promotion to reward somebody who's a loyal customer to buy your product. Sounds counterintuitive. It's more effective for you to invite me into this community and have me become a big part of this community and then reward me through the community through a special, look, I'll send you something new, I'll try something new on you, whatever, rather than have a discount at shelf. Okay? So
Well,
if you can build, again, a relationship, build a community around your brand, a thriving community, and we're going to use the pull strategy. And if you can leverage that pull strategy to help your customers drive sales and distribution at other retailers. So, for example, you're in Denver. Let's say that you wanted to get into New Mexico, pick your city, doesn't matter. If you developed a community in that area through your social media, through all the things that you're doing, your Amazon, etc., then those customers should, I would think they'd probably be happy to go into a retailer in their market and say, how come I can't buy this product here? So, two things. As a customer, retailers generically don't sell anything. What they sell is the real estate that your product takes up on their shelf. They
yep.
want more traffic in their store. If I can leverage the relationship, your relationship as a brand, me as a retailer can leverage your relationship as a brand to drive more traffic into my store so they buy more stuff, share of wallet. Try to get them to buy as much of the stuff on their list every month instead of inviting them to go to their competition. So this is all about, 1, people. 2, how do we get there? The community. 3, the story, turnkey sales store strategies course. And it's all about building that into your story. And so as you're moving forward, kind of back to your other question, you make sure that everyone is in lockstep with what you're doing. So you've heard the example, I use this all the time. I tell you a story and then you share it with someone else and they share it with someone else and so on. By the time the story comes back around to me, it's unrecognizable. That is the number one reason I think most brands struggle. Again, this is about podcast 68. If I can have everyone under my umbrella, everyone on my team, be in lockstep with the same passion and enthusiasm as you have, and be able to share that story effectively with retailers through my community
Yep.
to build relationships with my community other markets, that's a home run. And by the way, that's a whole lot cheaper than anything else. And if you can do this effectively, then you can go to a retailer and say, no, I don't think I'm paying slotting. You've got a line outside wanting my product. And, I don't need to, I'm doing great where, we get into that
Yeah.
being a little facetious, but the point is, if you've got people knocking their door down, kicking their door in, or however you want to word it, begging for your product because you have such a loyal following, because people love your product, know, like, love, all that stuff. That's the answer to that question. Does that help?
It does. It's exactly what Vega did. For those of you who know the Vega brand that White
Okay.
Wave purchased and now Dannon or Danone owns. I heard that story a lot, and it reminds me of them. They had these super passionate people that didn't work for the brand, but took up this cause and would go into stores and demo the product for free. I mean, literally
Yeah.
super passionate evangelists, and I can't think of a better way to drive that success. So you got my mind churning right now on like 1,000. Now you've just added to my to-dos. But no,
Oh no.
I know. I actually, I 100% agree, and it's absolutely our focus point going forward. And people for me goes beyond my consumer. It's people on my team, and
Yes.
so I could not be where I'm at right now without the people in my corner. I've mentioned Haley Bradley, who's on my team, who
I met her.
is
Yeah.
a rock star and absolutely I would not be as successful. This company would not be successful. I personally would not be as successful without her. Um, the advisors I have on this company, the investors who have supported me, and then just the people. I mentioned this actually. We're interviewing right now for a third role.
Cool.
And I was telling the story today to one of our candidates around. We hear this a lot, and it's a great thing, but people say, you really have something here. This is really going to go places. And the power of those words to an entrepreneur are so valuable because it's so hard. And so
It's validation.
it's validation, and it's uplifting, it's emotional. And so for all the people listening, I think having those people around you that validate you, support you, are in your corner, whether they're on your team, they're anecdotal, are just absolutely critical to our success. So just thought
Absolutely.
I'd put it out there as well.
No, thank you. I mean, again, that goes back to making sure your story is consistent, making sure that everyone's in lockstep, making sure that everyone is aligned. I remember when I was working for a big CPG company years ago, we used to joke about the only way to move up in the company was to figure out how to knock off the guy above you. That's
Yeah.
not the atmosphere. That's some way some big CPG companies are, where it's so impersonal. And what I love about natural, what makes natural, is the community. And so you've got people that are genuine, authentic, that want to work with you, want to support you, want to see you thrive. Even people, for example, me, that don't even work for you, don't have a stake in the company, etc. That's why you're here. But yet, we're trying to raise the bar in the industry. We're trying to help others through our story. So
Yeah.
thank you again for coming on. Thank you
Thank you.
again for your story. I'll make sure to put a link to Ka-Pop in the show notes and on the podcast webpage. Again, can't thank you enough. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure. And if there's anything Kapop can do for anyone out there or me personally, we're an email away. So never hesitate to reach out.
Love it. If you send me your email, whatever email address you want me to use, I'll
Yep.
put that in the show notes as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. As always, I want to thank you for listening. This show is about you and it's for you. In appreciation for your time, there's a free downloadable guide for you at the end of every show. I always try to include one easy to download, quick to digest strategy that you can instantly adopt and make your own. One that you can use to grow sustainable sales with and compete more effectively. And make sure you go back and listen to prior episodes where I answer your most pressing questions. If you like the episode, share it with a friend, subscribe, and leave a review. I'll be certain to put a link to K-pop in the show notes and on the podcast webpage. You can get there by going to brandsecretsandstrategies.com/session 126. Thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.